He walked the same streets every single day, wearing the same dusty orange uniform, pushing a metal cart that creaked with every step. To those rushing past, he was just another street sweeper, just another nameless face in the gray crowd. But no one knew that this man carried more than bags of trash on his shoulders. He carried the weight of a lifetime of silent battles. Miguel Rocha, 37 years old, the only son of a woman who raised him alone, surrounded by empty pots and embraces that always made room for two. His childhood was marked by absences, of a father, of toys, of chances. He grew up fast, matured even faster. He gave up his own dreams to care for the one person who only ever dreamed of the basics: health, shelter, food. He was thin, his skin weathered by the sun, his teeth imperfect, and his smile so shy it barely dared to appear. But inside that tired body lived a soul as pure as the sidewalks he cleaned every day. Every day started the same way. He woke at 4 a.m., boiled water, prepared the oatmeal his mother could still manage to eat, gave her medication, tucked in her blankets, moved the bucket beside her bed, and left for his 6 a.m. shift. By noon, he was running back home to accompany her to chemotherapy sessions. He returned to work by 3 p.m. Then came the grocery store, the pharmacy, and at the end of the night, he would massage her feet with lavender oil, as if his tenderness alone could ease the weight of her pain. Miguel was the kind of man no one noticed. He wasn't on social media, didn't know how to use a banking app, had no idea what a vacation felt like. He had never entered a restaurant unless it was through the back door, carrying garbage bags. He never owned a car, never left the neighborhood he was born in, but he knew exactly where to find the cheapest pharmacies, the safest bus stops, and how to fold his mother's blanket without waking her. Despite his exhaustion, he never complained. Even while sick, with a chronic gastritis that burned through his stomach and back pain that barely let him sleep, he kept going, because there was no other choice. Because giving up had never been an option. Because he had promised himself, when his mother was diagnosed, that she wouldn't face it alone. No one knew, no one saw. But inside that chest beat the rarest kind of love. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't pose, doesn't ask for applause. The kind of love that simply acts. And it was this love, this quiet, raw, unwavering way of being, that without knowing, would one day touch a woman on the other side of the city, in a sterile white room where pain was measured by scans, but where the heart could still feel. Dona Lourdes had never gone far in school, but she knew things no book could ever teach. She knew how to listen in silence, soothe with a glance, and heal with the warmth of a hand on the forehead. She came from a generation that had learned to survive with little, and to love with everything. She raised Miguel alone, ever since he was just a crying baby in a makeshift cradle of knotted bedsheets. His father never wanted to know, but she knew from his very first cry that she would make that child the purpose of her entire existence. She worked her whole life as a cleaning lady. Her body was small, her hair had turned gray too early, and her smile endured even when the world came crashing down. On good days, she'd cook rice, beans, and egg farofa and call it a feast. On bad days, it was tea with crackers, and she'd say it was enough. The one thing that was never missing was affection, the kind that fills a tiny two-room shack and makes it feel like a palace. Miguel grew up with very little of everything, but he never felt a lack of love. And that's why, when illness came, he didn't hesitate. He would face whatever came to repay all she had done for him. Cancer crept in like a thief in the night, uninvited. First came the pain, then the persistent cough, the tests, the waiting, the cruel diagnosis, advanced stage, metastasis. Miguel's world collapsed. But she just took a deep breath and said, "My son, whatever God wills, so it shall be. But as long as I'm here, we carry on, one day at a time." Even weak, she was the one comforting her son. Even nauseous, she was the one asking if he had eaten. Even moaning in pain, she was the one who smiled, so he wouldn't be afraid. And Miguel, eyes full of tears, pretended to believe she would get better, that the chemo would work, that everything would go back to how it used to be, even though deep down, he knew her time was running out. But Dona Lourdes didn't care about time. She only wanted her son to be okay, to find someone, to have a life beyond pain, to be loved the way she loved him. And that's why, every time Miguel pushed her wheelchair into the treatment room, she closed her eyes and prayed, "Lord, I'm leaving, but please, let someone good take my place." And as life often has its mysterious ways of answering prayers, it was there, among cold hospital hallways, between sighs of pain and shy smiles, that fate began stitching the impossible. Because Dona Lourdes was fading, but her love was just about to bloom somewhere else. On the 8th floor of San Lucas Hospital, the days started early and ended late. Everything ran like clockwork. Charts, exams, scalpels, diagnoses, lives crossing hallways like silent waves. But that morning, something unusual happened. A meeting of eyes that wasn't listed in any spreadsheet, nor part of any medical protocol. Dr. Helena Vasconcelos was known for her surgical precision and graceful composure. Educated at the finest universities, daughter of a traditional São Paulo medical family, an oncology specialist, and a respected name among her peers. Her coat was pristine, her posture unwavering, her voice calm. And yet, despite all her titles, there was a solitude in her no one had ever dared to name. She was always surrounded by wealthy men, well-dressed suitors, and empty soirees. But deep down, she felt untouched by anything truly real. Love, to her, was only a hypothesis, never a fact. Until that morning, in the middle of a shift change and a medication update, she saw him. Miguel was pushing a wheelchair, his mother curled beneath a thin blanket. He wore a worn-out cap, patched-up pants, and stared down at the floor as if apologizing for taking up space. He looked visibly out of place in that polished, clinical world. But when he approached the nurse's station, his voice broke through, soft, but filled with care. "Mrs. Lourdes has an appointment with Dr. Helena. She's not feeling well today. I was wondering if there's any chance she could be seen earlier." Helena heard him from a distance. Then she looked at him, truly looked. And in that moment, time seemed to slow. There was something in him she had never seen in any man before. It wasn't beauty. It was presence. The way he adjusted the blanket over his mother's knees, the tenderness in his eyes, the way he spoke, as if afraid to ask for help, but needing it anyway. It was a rare kind of love, the kind that doesn't need words. She stepped closer. "Good morning, sir. Miguel Rocha. I'm Dr. Helena. Mrs. Lourdes is already on my list. But yes, I can see you both earlier." Miguel looked up, surprised by the kindness. And Helena, for the first time in ages, felt her own heart react to a gaze. During the consultation, she observed more than just clinical signs. She noticed how Miguel held his mother's hand, how he described the symptoms in detail, despite having no formal training, how he gently wiped the corner of her mouth when she coughed. And right there, in that sterile white hospital room, Helena saw more compassion in a man wearing a dirty uniform than she had ever witnessed at any medical congress. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it wasn't ordinary. At the end of the consultation, as she printed out a new prescription, she asked, "What do you do for a living, Miguel?" "I'm a street cleaner, doctor, but I've been off work for a few weeks because of this pain in my back that won't go away." She nodded, and as she watched him leave, gently pushing his mother down the corridor, she felt a part of herself leave with them. That day, Helena saw 12 more patients, wrote prescriptions, signed reports. But when she got home, the only image that filled her mind was the crooked smile of that man no one noticed, but whom she couldn't forget. At the hospital, amid rushed diagnoses and silent pressure, Helena's life had always been torn between what others expected of her and what, deep down, she truly longed for. But it was in the quiet figure of Miguel that something began to shift. Not in some grand, scandalous way, not with fireworks or revelations, but with presence. In the following weeks, Dona Lourdes returned religiously for her chemotherapy sessions. And Miguel, though exhausted, though his face showed the toll of chronic back pain, was always there. He never complained, never raised his voice. He brought his mother with a neatly folded blanket, a fresh passion fruit juice he made himself, and a shy smile that surfaced whenever Dr. Helena greeted them with sincerity. She began to notice more than she should, the details others overlooked, like how Miguel read each of his mother's medications out loud to make sure it was correct, how he wrote notes in an old notebook, logging times, reactions, even questions for the next visit, how he adjusted Helena's white coat on her shoulders so she wouldn't feel cold, how even without understanding the test results, he somehow knew everything that mattered. One afternoon, Dona Lourdes had to be admitted for observation. Helena came by the room as she always did, but this time, Miguel was alone. Sitting at the bedside, eyes red, fingers intertwined, his breathing slow, like someone reciting a prayer without words. She entered quietly. "Miguel," he looked up, surprised. "Doctor, I thought you only made rounds in the morning. Today I wanted to check in, on her and on you." The words caught him off guard. No one ever asked how he was. Ever. He lowered his gaze. I'm okay. I mean, we get through, right? One day at a time. She stepped closer, sat in the chair beside him. Have you ever thought about taking care of yourself too? Miguel gave a shy smile. Doctor, I'm just a guy who pushes a trash cart and tries to keep his mom alive. Taking care of me? That's a luxury I can't afford. That answer hurt her more than any diagnosis ever had, because he said it with such ease, like someone who had grown used to being invisible. But in that moment, Helena wanted so badly to say, you are not just that. You are so much more than you know. She didn't say it. Not yet. But she stayed. They talked for minutes that felt like hours. She heard about his childhood, the cakes his mother used to bake in a wood stove, the day he almost lost his job for skipping work to take her to the clinic. And without realizing it, she laughed with him, cried with him, saw herself in him. And when she said goodbye that afternoon, one phrase got stuck in her throat. The world may not see your strength, Miguel, but I do. That night, Helena dreamed of the sound of his laughter, and woke up with a tight chest, as if she had begun to feel, even before she knew what it was. It was just another Wednesday. The hospital was in turmoil over an urgent case. Helena had performed 3 back-to-back surgeries, and exhaustion draped over her shoulders like an invisible cloak. But for some reason, the name Miguel Rocha kept echoing in her mind. She had tried to convince herself it was just admiration, a fleeting fondness for a man too kind for this world. But the truth was, her heart was already crossing a line she had sworn never to approach. At the end of her shift, she learned that Dona Lourdes had been discharged and that Miguel was waiting in the reception area. She hesitated, took a deep breath, and then, defying every rational filter she lived by, she went downstairs. There he was, sitting with his backpack on his lap, hands clasped together, eyes lowered, waiting with the patience and weariness of someone used to enduring. When he saw her, he stood up quickly, almost stumbling. Dr. Helena, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Miguel. Your mother's been cleared. And you, have you had dinner? He looked at her, confused. He didn't understand, didn't quite process. Me? No, I just had some bread and coffee for lunch. Why? She smiled, disarmed for the first time. Because I'm going to eat now, and I'd like some company. Miguel's eyes widened. He tried to decline, said he was sweaty, not presentable, that she might regret it. But she simply grabbed the strap of her purse and replied with gentle firmness, I just want to talk. With you. Just as you are. And so, that night, a worn-out street cleaner and an elegant doctor shared a small table in a 24-hour bakery with paper napkins, shy laughter, and glances that tried, and failed, to hide something far deeper than hunger. They talked about music, childhood, food. They laughed about how much Miguel hated cucumbers. Helena confessed she had always been afraid of needles, ironically. And somewhere between the café au lait and the grilled sandwich, their eyes met for longer, and with fewer guards. Why me? Miguel asked, staring at his own fingers. I'm not handsome. I'm not educated. I don't even have perfect teeth. Helena took a second before answering. Because you're the only man I've ever met who truly knows what love is. And that, Miguel, you don't learn in medical school. You carry it in your heart. He looked away, too moved to respond, and she honored the silence. When they finished, they walked together to the bus stop. There was no kiss, no promise, just a drawn-out good night, and a lingering wave that hovered in the air like a whispered prayer. But there, beneath the yellow glow of a forgotten streetlight, something had been born. Something too big for either of them to contain. Something that, even in silence, was already making noise in their hearts. It was only a matter of time. Helena's world and Miguel's world were never meant to cross, and everyone around them made sure to remind them of that. After that quiet, meaningful cafe, they started seeing each other more often. A quick text at the end of the day, a discreet lunch in the hospital cafeteria, a handwritten note tucked into Dona Lourdes's file. It was all very simple, very light, and for that reason, so incredibly deep. But all it took was Helena casually mentioning to her sister during a family dinner that she was seeing an amazing man, simple, with a rare kindness, for the real world to come crashing in with both feet. Simple? What kind of simple? Her sister asked, between glasses of wine and embroidered napkins. He's a street cleaner, Helena replied, with the calm of someone who already knew what would come next. A street cleaner! Helena, for God's sake, you're a doctor, an oncologist, a Vasconcelos. This is the kind of thing that ruins reputations. The words hit like punches. Her father, a stern and traditional man, could barely contain his outrage. Have you lost your mind? You're going to throw away everything we've built for a man who picks up trash off the street? Are you sick? Helena, eyes filled with tears, took a deep breath. I'm healing, Dad. For the first time, I feel like I'm living something real, something clean. Her mother tried to soften things, saying it was just a phase, that Helena had always been too sensitive, that one day she would meet someone on her level. But none of them understood that what Helena had found in Miguel, no inheritance, no last name, no diploma could ever give her. That same week, Miguel was called into a casual meeting with hospital administration. Someone had commented on his inappropriate behavior in the hallways, how he was overstepping his role as an accompanying visitor. The administrator's voice was polite, but it dripped with the same poison. Mr. Miguel, your presence here must remain strictly as a companion. Please avoid any conduct that could compromise the image of the institution. He left the room with sweaty hands and a tight chest. He felt shame, not for himself, but for her. He feared being a burden, a mistake, an obstacle. That same day, he sent a message to Helena, short, direct. Dr. Helena, thank you for everything. You are light, but I think it's best we stop here. You deserve someone from your world. Helena saw the message at 11:12 p.m. She stared at the screen for long minutes. Then she cried. Not just from sadness, but from rage. Rage at a world that measures love by bank accounts. Rage at the cowardice of those who will never understand that a person's soul is worth more than any appearance. The next morning, she put on her white coat like armor, and with her head held high, she entered the room where Miguel sat with Dona Lourdes. Good morning, Miguel. I read your message. He couldn't look her in the eye. It was for the best, doctor. For you. But not for me, because I don't want someone from my world. I want someone who will build a world with me. And I chose you. And there, in front of everyone, with Miguel's mother smiling softly and nurses pretending not to listen, she held out her hand, and he, filled with fear, love, and gratitude, took it. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of love, and love doesn't need permission to exist. The rain that Friday wouldn't stop falling. It was as if the sky already knew what was coming. The hospital hallways were quieter than usual, and even the sound of footsteps seemed to respect the moment. Miguel felt a different weight in his chest. It wasn't fatigue, it was a premonition. Dona Lourdes had been weak for days. The tests showed progression. The doctors spoke of comfort, quality of life, acceptance. But Miguel still prepared her juice with hope, still fluffed the pillow like she might sit up, still believed, or pretended to believe, that a miracle would come. Helena, with her heart in pieces, already knew what she needed to say. But how do you tell a son, who gave every ounce of himself, that the end is near? She entered the room slowly, holding the clipboard as if it could shield her from pain. Dona Lourdes was asleep, pale, lips cracked. Miguel held her hand like he was holding on to life itself. She's better today, isn't she? Slept all night, he said with a trembling smile. Helena sat beside him, lowered her eyes, took a deep breath. Miguel, we need to talk. The words landed like a silent thunderclap. He understood. Even before she said more, he understood. But he didn't cry. He just bowed his head and nodded, like someone who expected it, but still bleeds. Is she in pain? He asked, voice breaking. No, we're making sure of that. Then I just want her not to suffer, even if it breaks me, even if it takes everything from me. That night, Helena stayed, in her white coat, but also with her soul. She sat on the floor beside the bed. Miguel fell asleep with his head resting against the mattress, holding his mother's hand. And for the first time, Helena ran her fingers through his hair with the same tenderness one uses to touch a wound. It was there, in that cramped room, among machines and silence, that she realized she had never loved anyone. Not truly. Not until now. In the days that followed, she helped him feed Dona Lourdes, change her, pray with her. And even in her weakness, Dona Lourdes smiled. She knew. She knew she was leaving. But she also knew she was leaving Miguel in the right hands. My son, she whispered one afternoon, while Helena stepped out of the room. That woman, she's your new beginning. And I can go in peace if you promise me you won't shut down. Mom, promise me, Miguel. Love, for me. He cried like never before. And he promised. And the next night, she left, silently. without pain, with her heart at peace, holding her son's hand. The burial was simple, just as she wanted. No expensive flowers, no long speeches, just real people. Helena stayed by his side the entire time. When he nearly collapsed, she held him. When he screamed from the pain in his chest, it was in her arms that he wept. And there, between loss and embrace, love bloomed even stronger. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover who truly stayed. Dona Lourdes' voice no longer echoed through the house. The kettle she so often used for tea no longer whistled. The old radio, always tuned to her favorite station, now rested in silence on the side table. But inside Miguel, everything still pulsed with her presence. Her words, her gestures, the whispered advice at bedtime. They were all still there, etched into his chest like a tattoo time couldn't erase. In the days following the funeral, Miguel withdrew into his grief. Even with Helena's love beside him, even with a kind of support he never imagined having, his mother's absence was a hollow that swallowed light. He slept little, ate poorly, avoided conversations. The pain washed over him in waves, sometimes soft, sometimes unbearable. But what held him up, even without him noticing, was a promise. In her final week of life, still lucid despite the frailty, Dona Lourdes had asked to be alone with him. They were in the hospital, the sun gently spilling through the window, the room calm. She asked him to sit close. Miguel took her cold, fragile hand in his. "My son," she said, voice weak but steady. "There's something I want you to promise me. Whatever you want, Mom. That you'll let someone love you. That you'll let life in again. Even if I'm not here anymore." Miguel held back his tears. "You've always been everything to me." "I know," she said, closing her eyes for a moment. "But I don't want my love to close you off from the world. I want it to prepare you. And that doctor, that woman with the kind eyes, she looks at you in a way that helps me sleep more peacefully." It was the last real conversation they had. Now, days after goodbye, Miguel was walking to the same hospital, no longer as a companion, but as a man ready to honor the promise he made. He wore his mother's favorite shirt, carefully ironed. In his hand, a small bouquet of wildflowers, picked from the sidewalks of his own neighborhood. When he arrived, he found Helena in the lobby. She was in her white coat, hair pinned back, just as always. But when she saw him, she let her guard fall. He walked up to her. "I'm not good with words, but there's one thing I need to say." "What is it?" she asked, eyes already welling up. "Thank you. For everything. For the patience. For the courage. For the love. For helping me keep my promise." She smiled, a smile laced with tears. It was her, wasn't it? Dona Lourdes. "Yes, she saw you before I did, and I'm here today, to tell you that now. I see you too." Helena dropped the clipboard. The hospital could wait. The protocols, the appointments, the shifts, everything could wait. Because in that moment, love was the only urgency. And when they embraced there, in the middle of the crowded reception area, among plastic chairs and background noise, it felt like the whole world fell silent. Dona Lourdes was gone, but her wish lived on. And now, love had found a home. The absence of Dona Lourdes wasn't made only of silence. It was made of echoes. In every corner of the house, there was a trace of her. In the cupboard stacked with plastic containers. In the crocheted doily draped over the couch. In the faded flowered mug left by the sink. Miguel spent his days bumping into memories. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he broke down. But grief never followed a script. Helena tried to be strong. She was there every day, even with the exhausting routine of the hospital. She made the coffee, washed the dishes, tidied what she could, but above all, she knew how to listen. And it was that shared silence that healed the most. Miguel wasn't good at showing things, but his eyes spoke, and Helena understood. She understood that, even though she now stood at the heart of that home, there was a piece of his heart still living in the room where Dona Lourdes had left this world. And that didn't push her away. On the contrary, it drew her closer. Because she too had grown attached to that strong, gentle woman who, even at the end of her life, had the strength to unite two souls that might never have found each other. One afternoon, while packing away old clothes into boxes, Miguel found one of Dona Lourdes' notebooks. The notes were simple: recipes, bills, scattered thoughts. But on the last page, written in trembling handwriting, there was a sentence they would never forget. "If my son smiles after I'm gone, then I lived to fulfill my purpose." Helena read it aloud. Miguel collapsed. He cried on his knees, face in his hands, releasing all the grief he had held back for weeks. And Helena knelt beside him, hugging him tightly, as if saying, "You're not going to drown alone." It was from that moment on that grief turned into a seed. The pain didn't stop, but it began to grow roots. Together they started visiting her grave, bringing wildflowers, her favorites. Miguel slowly returned to work. Helena set up a small library at home, using the medical books his mother never got to study, but that now stood for new beginnings. And one day, Miguel came in holding a glass jar. Inside there were tiny cutouts, notes, phrases his mother used to say every day. "This is for our daughter," he said, unprompted. "Our daughter?" Helena asked, surprised. "Yeah, when she gets here, I want her to know her grandmother, even if she never sees her." Helena cried, not from shock, but from the certainty that came with it. "And what will her name be?" Miguel didn't hesitate. Maria Lourdes. And in that moment, pain became tribute. Absence became a name. And death became continuity. Because true love doesn't end with death. It simply changes form and lives on in those who remain. There was no cathedral, no red carpet, no designer dress on their wedding day, but there was a clear sky, the smell of fresh bread baking in the oven, and soft music playing from a borrowed radio. The ceremony took place on the rooftop of the house where Miguel grew up, overlooking clotheslines, cracked neighborhood walls, and a horizon painted with hope. Helena walked in wearing a simple white dress, but with the most vibrant look she had ever carried. There stood the few, but the real ones. Hospital colleagues, street-sweeping friends, Dona Aparecida from the corner store, Mr. Raimundo from the bus stop, even the priest who visited terminal patients. Everyone there knew they were witnessing something rare, a love that wasn't born of appearances or chance, but of care. Miguel wore a neatly ironed light blue shirt. Helena, her hair braided softly, carried in her eyes the same light Dona Lourdes had always admired. And when the two of them looked at each other, hands entwined beneath the blessing of the open sky, no word could express what their souls were already saying. "Do you promise to love even on the hard days?" the priest asked. "I've been loving her for a long time," Miguel replied. "Do you promise to care even when it hurts?" he asked Helena. "He's the one who taught me what care really means." And when the vows ended and simple applause filled the air, Miguel looked up to the sky and whispered, "Mom, I'm keeping my promise. I'm smiling. I'm living." Time passed the way it does for those who truly love, in a joyful rush and with memories that never fade. Helena adjusted her schedule to work part-time at a community clinic. Miguel continued his street sweeping, now more careful with his health. In the afternoons, they shared coffee from the same mug and talked about everything, like two old friends who never tire of one another. And then, she arrived. Maria Lourdes. Tiny, rosy, with her mother's eyes and her father's crooked smile. She was born from a peaceful labor, in a hospital where everyone knew the couple, and where the staff teared up seeing the baby's name on her wristband. When Miguel held his daughter for the first time, he cried silently. "She'll know who her grandma was," he said, stroking the newborn's forehead. "She'll know she came from a love that stood against the whole world." Helena, resting on the hospital bed, watched the scene with a heart overflowing. She knew that now, more than ever, she had a home, not built of walls, but of souls. And the house, once silent, came alive again with voices, laughter, tiny footsteps. The smell of porridge once more filled the kitchen. And on the shelf by the door, beside a framed photo of Miguel's mother, a handwritten note read, "If my son smiles after I'm gone, then I live to fulfill my purpose." And he was smiling, because her love didn't end. It became foundation. It became a daughter. It became home.